Teegan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I just noticed that I don't have my headphones on and I'm admiring yours here. But all jokes aside, seriously, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. We had a couple of good chats previously, and it's great to have you on to talk about career transformation, job search, and some very relevant things for.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you today. I have worked with an increasing amount of chief legal officers and various legal roles within corporate organizations in the past, I would say 2 years, where I really hadn't touched that niche. But it's becoming more and more important for cross functional success. And so when you reached out, I was like, yes, let's talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. And just by way of background, just to kind of introduce our listeners to what you do. So you founded Jolt Your Career. And can you tell us a bit about what Jolt Your Career is and what brought you down that path?
Yeah, so Jolt Your Career started off as just a side hustle. I wrote resumes for people when I worked in the government and as a recruiter. And then when I had enough of the red tape, which is ironic because you're the definition of red tape, well, your field is the definition of red tape, and had enough of just the BS that happens behind the scenes of hiring, I decided, nope, it's not going to be a side hustle. It's going to be my full-time job. I am going to impact the world and people's lives by helping them find career fulfillment. And then over the years, that extended beyond resume writing to career coaching and interview prep and things like that. And now I have a full-blown staffing agency as that targets startups, as well as a consulting arm at JYC, where I support corporate entities building out various people operation functions, be that internal mobility or thinking about what kind of technology that we can use in TA to create a better candidate experience and attract best in class talent.
And I love your approach to it, which is really about fulfillment. And I think for lawyers, that's something that's super relevant for us today to really think about why we are doing what we're doing. How do we feel? These are things that we're not used to talking about. These things, how do you feel with the work that you're doing? What makes you happy? What do you not like about your job? How is it fitting into your life? All of those things. You've really gone beyond what most, recruiting or staffing agencies do, and you started to touch upon those personal aspects of that.
There has to be that synergy there to find long-term alignment, and long-term is subjective because the average person only lasts 4 years in their role, if that, depending on the industry that they're in. And so what does that really look like in terms of how can we bring someone in that's going to have the right skill set, the right mindset, to build the organization up and the people around them up, and at the end of the day, good people want to work with good people.
Good people want to work with good people. And I don't think I shared with you my story of having worked in a law firm and the moment when I decided that that was not for me. God bless everybody who does that. But for me personally, it just wasn't a fit. And I knew within 2.5, 3 years of that was not the path for me. And can you tell us a little bit how you discovered that what you were doing was not the path for you and what led you to what you do now?
Yeah, well, I graduated during the recession. And so I wanted to get into the juvenile justice system, ironically enough. But in Chicagoland area, Cook County had all their new hire offers rescinded because of union disputes. And so I was jobless, and I started working for a Department of Labor program that helped youth, which is classified as essentially people could be in the program up to age 26. Loved it. Still have fond memories of it. And then I was hit by a fuel tanker on the expressway on my way to work in inclement weather, and realized, wow, I have no life. Like, if I died today, sure, I would impact a lot of people's lives around me, but I had no life myself because work was all I did. Because in order to be good at it, there wasn't time for anything else. And so I started thinking as I was recovering from a severe concussion, like what do I want to do? So I started shifting, like, hey, the reason why kids are screwed up is because of their parents and because of society. And so if I worked with more adults, and I mean, granted, these people were adults, but that's just how the government classifies it. If I worked with a larger subset, people impacted by reduction in force, people impacted by technology taking over their skill sets and their jobs becoming obsolete, there would be less people facing addiction because of job instability. There would be less people facing food shortages for their families because there would be more people making more money, or the right people making the right decisions from the top down. And so I started working with reduction in force, veterans returning from service, et cetera. And I basically found a back door to hiring. Like, how do you get these companies to hire people that they don't want to hire? And that opened eyes at a very early age, in my a very early stage of my career. And I was working, of course, as a government representative, making sure that they were in compliance, which, nobody really likes when somebody comes in and says, all right, let's make sure the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But when doing that, I built a deeper level of trust and rapport with these leaders at these Fortune 100 companies around the Chicagoland area, and really got to understand how they made business decisions and how they would stray from what they would typically do in special cases. And then I built a whole entire program around it, and had phenomenal numbers, even worked on the AARP grant and things like that, for people facing age discrimination. Um, and I eventually decided, all right, it's time to let more people have access to this kind of information, because the more people who know how to work the system, the better people are going to have a fighting chance at getting jobs that align with what their goals are. When people are happy at work, they're happier in the community, volunteering more, they're investing more, they're spending more time with their families or the people who matter to them. And that's special. So that's how it kind of all came together.
I, it really resonates with me when you said you had that moment where you asked yourself, what kind of like, if I don't have this job, what am I doing? What it's back to that fundamental question, like, what is my purpose? And we've been trained to kind of bypass that question. We've, particularly as lawyers, I mean, we've been trained to think, okay, I've got this salary offer here, I've got that salary offer there. Yes, I can sacrifice my happiness for 4 or 5 years to make a certain amount of money to take care of financial obligations. Maybe there's a house that I want, maybe there's, we think in that way.
Well, law school is not
law,
cheap.
law school is not cheap for sure. You get into that mode of thinking it's all about the money, and then you hit a certain point in your life where you're like, wait a minute, it ain't all about the money, because I've got these health issues. My child is getting older and I didn't have time to spend with him or her. And so those are real scenarios that people are facing, and particularly today.
And we all face them. And so whatever your wake up call was, mine was getting hit by a fuel tanker, and then mine was switching jobs and having leadership ask me to question my integrity. And one, that's not something that you can do when you're recruiting for federal entities, but also, it's just not something I'm willing to do. And so whatever your wake up call is, it doesn't really matter. It's just that it happened. And what a blessing in disguise, typically something negative, to turn it into a positive, because there's nothing that you can do to change the path that you took in the past, but you can take ownership and move forward confidently, knowing that you deserve to live the life that you want to live. And that might be, all right, I'm going to slow down a little bit and I'm going to pivot here, or I might need to work my way back up, or whatever that may look like. But while you're in that mess, it's getting you closer to living the type of life that you want. And that is a really powerful place to be at.
Do you think that sometimes people need a push, or they need to talk? I mean, yes, you talk to people about the job and the career and the aspects, but isn't there also, I mean, I'd imagine there is that coaching part that you say, where they need to be told that it's okay to pivot. It's okay to change. It's okay to decide that what I've been doing for the past 10 years no longer serves me.
It's scary. Change is scary. And so, yeah, I do think that people need a push or a boost of confidence or a jolt. I got the name Jolt Your Career because one of my very first clients said, like, well, he was like, you really gave me a kick in the you know what. And I was like, well, that won't be a company name. And then he was like, well, use a jolt. And sometimes we do need a jolt. And how many of us got into the career paths that we did because there was family pressure, or because we felt an obligation to our community to be that representative that we didn't see around us coming up. And so when we get to that point where we no longer have that pressure from one person or another and just really think about what we want, it's scary, and we need to know it's going to be okay and that other people have done it. And as soon as we come to terms with that, it's like, yep, and I can do it too. And then the magic happens, and you start doing that deep work that you've kind of been pushing aside, because when you're going through the motions and you're making good money and you feel like you're happy at work, you it's really easy to ignore some red flags that you wouldn't otherwise be thinking about. And so it's a push, a jolt, a compassionate hug, just something. Sorry, can you hear that ding ding going on?
No,
Okay, perfect. Sorry, you're gonna have to cut
that's
that
okay.
out. But yeah, it's absolutely important for somebody to be on your side. For most people, there are some people who just have the courage to do everything by themselves, but very rarely have I met somebody who's achieved what they have in a silo. And oftentimes you do need that external voice to support you, because the friends that you surround yourself with or your family, they may have a low risk tolerance, and change is risky.
Change is risky, and I guess I'm a risk loving person because I've done a lot of risky stuff in my career. But I wanted to talk about, like, how you mentioned there's always that moment, right? So your moment was the accident. My moment was COVID. We were living in China when COVID hit, when it started in Wuhan, and it was super scary for me. My daughter was 3 months old, barely even 3 months old. I had to make a decision then and there, like, are we going to stay? Are we going to go? And it was really, a harrowing decision. I remember I left a whole bunch of breast milk in the fridge, in the freezer, just a crazy moment in time. But after that, I realized, like, I'm basically just living in certain locations because the company is telling me to. As I remember
Yeah.
calling my boss and saying, we have to leave Shanghai because there's something happening here. And she was like, why? She was like, why? Why do you need to leave? There was that lack of understanding. And I think with elections coming up and such sort of a change in atmosphere in the US, so many people are feeling like their jobs are not paying enough. Inflation is becoming rampant, and that satisfaction of, how you said, like, the ability to be able to ignore the red flags, that's gone. The red flags are there are red flags all over the place. So it seems like now is the time for people to really take a look at their careers and what's important to them.
I think COVID was a really big wake up call for a lot of people. And then there was a shift where the people had the power and not the companies, but just for like a year. And then companies quickly took that back. And that's where we're at now. We're in a flat hiring market. Going back decades, election years are always a flat hiring market, even without inflation, war, everything else that we're experiencing right now across the globe. And it creates a really challenging environment because people are aware that they're no longer satisfied, or that there's an itch that needs to be scratched. And then they finally have the courage to make a change, and then they realize no one's hiring, or when somebody is getting hired, it's a deal that's happening under the table and not being posted. And how the heck do you navigate during times like this? And the traditional way of job seeking just doesn't work, and it adds a layer of complexity that can discourage people, but it's possible, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about it today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, For lawyers in particular, like I do remember there was this period of time where the market was really hot. And I mean, it's funny for me because I've always been told like, oh, Jamilia, you can get a job anywhere, right? And so when I came to Dubai, I thought that was still true. But the Dubai job market is not like any other job market I've seen. The wages are quite low because there's a lot of people coming in and that want to be here. And then also there is this language requirement. People must speak Arabic. And so there are a lot of different challenges and hurdles there. But I think everyone is experiencing some sort of challenge in that job market. And I always tell people that the answer is in technology, because there's one thing that's ramping up these days, and I'm following the money. The money is going into, for sure, billions and billions of dollars, and also into blockchain technology. And I see that as sort of where the opportunities are headed.
Yeah, technology is making waves, and especially for lawyers, it touches every single aspect of what you do. Because, well, when you think about it, when you're in a corporate setting, not like a firm, right? And you're looking at the policies that the organization has in place, and looking at mitigating risk and keeping up with compliance and all of those things. In the United States, at least, we're so behind on the global standards, and this election is everyone's basically promised that during the first 100 years things are going to shift, and or first 100 days after the election things are going to shift. Certain policies are going to be rolled out because that's the way for them to make their mark, and you know, be respected as a global powerhouse, because we're kind of falling behind in the United States on that level of respect that the world has for us other as other players are coming up. And it's a time for lawyers to eat. How you said it, follow the money. It absolutely is, because organizations are going to be forced into making changes, and they're going to need to have strong legal teams to be able to roll these things out. And if companies are smart, and if job seekers are smart, they'd be putting their cases together and pitching these companies, hey, here's what's going to be coming down the pipeline. Here are the things that are going to need to be done. We could get started now. You don't need to wait to hire me until it rolls out. Let's start proactively doing some of these things so we're ready. And that's a great way to position yourself as a thought leader that touches every single aspect of an organization. And so instead of being like that dreaded red tape, like I joked about in the beginning of this segment, it's no, you're a trusted business partner that's going to keep me out of jail and make sure I can make money. Because every single time I have to pay a fine for not being in compliance or this, that, and the third, that takes away from what I can do. And so it is an amazing time for lawyers to get comfortable with not only using various aspects of technology, but understanding enough, in a global perspective on it, to show up in the room and make people listen to you. Have that type of influence that's necessary for organizations to thrive. Like, every organization is worried right now about their bottom line. Cost cutting, cost cutting, cost cutting. That's why we're in a flat market, partially because of inflation, partially because they're waiting for new laws to roll out with this election year. And so who better to have in the room than somebody who's like, yep, I seen it. I've seen it before. We've been through this. This is what's going to happen. These are the conferences I've attended, or what we hear in the legal circles about what's coming down the pipeline, and this is what we need to be thinking about. You're that breath of fresh air in the room of uncertainty, of saying, we don't have to worry about all of that. We know, based on what other countries have rolled out, this is probably going to be these types of standards, or if we're doing business in these countries, we already have to be doing that. And so let's start putting these things into place, and then when the legislation does come out, we're already 80% there. We'll tweak what needs to be tweaked and finish it off strong. We're done. We're way ahead of all of our competitors. And now, instead of suffering like the past couple of years most businesses have been suffering, now they're ahead of the game, and you can take credit for that.
You mentioned something that I think is like super important. You mentioned not waiting, and the rebranding process. And when some people hear the word rebranding, they get scared. Like you said, it's change, right? It's change. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you work with people on that rebranding. Let's say I'm a lawyer that's been practicing for 15 some odd years in a particular area that's not technology, and now I have to rebrand myself. What does that look like?
Well, even if it wasn't in the technology niche, you've had to touch technology at some point. Like, let's say you're a labor and attorney, a labor and employee attorney, right? And you're dealing with, people suing the company or harassment or whatever the case may be. You're doing all this research through technology. You're putting guardrails in place for the organization, a lot of times based on technology. All right, what type of messages can be shared in Teams messages, what kind of text messages aren't appropriate, what type of systems need to be in place to make sure that data isn't being lost. So should something need to be investigated, it can be. And so you're not completely removed, so you're not starting from scratch, you're just emphasizing that role that it in how you made decisions and how you rectified situations after the fact to decrease whatever it was that was occurring in the past. So if it feels overwhelming to do a complete rebrand, so like one of my signature packages in my program is the professional branding makeover. And people are like, no, I just need a resume update. All right, go work with somebody else. Because you don't, because the way you positioned yourself in the past isn't the way that you position yourself today. What does the market call for today? Right now in the market that we're in September of, or no, geez Louise, in August of 2024, we are in a cost cutting market that has AI booming. And so, where can we plug those things in or take into consideration? That might just be showing up to a couple of workshops and showing that you're attending thought leadership conferences, adding those things on there. Because you might not be able to say you've ever worked with AI in your role in the past, but you can say that you're proactively being involved in learning about it and its implications for your organization. Even if you're unemployed, you can be doing those things as a resume builder, for positioning you for that role that you want to do next.
And it's so funny how some people are shy, sort of rebrand themselves. It's like this hesitancy to say, I've attended that conference, or to, kind of put it out there that you're rebranded.
Yeah.
And I think we got to get away from that. We got to roll with it. We got to do it.
Nobody's going to pay attention except you, like, or maybe a loved one, right? Other people probably won't even notice that you rebranded. And if anything, it might be, oh, great new profile pic. They're not going to notice that you changed your headline or your banner, or maybe if you have a completely blank, LinkedIn profile, for example, and you updated it, somebody's just going to say it looks good. It's not going to be, no, that's not you, or, oh, well, this is a big shift. Like, as long as you're updating things with integrity and being honest about, stick to the facts, then nobody's going to be worried about it. Most of the time when I'm working with clients, they at least say their biggest fear is that their employer will know that they're looking while working. And that's fair. Like, how do I rebrand myself and not get busted at work for looking? And so I've had clients say, oh yeah, my spouse is taking a digital marketing course, and they use my LinkedIn profile as an example. Or, my kid is in college and they had to do a LinkedIn project, and so they're using mine. Or it was, hey, a client said something about how bad my LinkedIn profile looked and how it's setting a bad image for our department. And so, I got on there and fixed it. I mean, you can even start spreading some of those things yourself at work if you're concerned about it. Like, wow, somebody had mentioned, the lack of professionalism that I had on LinkedIn, and how inexperienced I look because I didn't, showcase any of my accomplishments. And it felt awful. And what do you think? Like, do you add anything on there, or what are you doing? And well, let me start working on it. And then it's less of a, oh, she's looking for work and she was embarrassed or he was embarrassed that somebody called them out for not looking good. And let's face it, a lot of us have egos. And so when somebody says that we're not up to par with a certain standard, it's just in our nature to be like, all right, like, let me raise this bar, like, here I am. And so there's ways to get creative with going about it so you can have confidence and not get put on the watch list at work of like a red flag of they might be thinking about leaving, especially if you didn't do anything with your brand in the past in terms of attending conferences, posting on LinkedIn, writing recommendations for peers and things of that nature.
And it sounds like, what you're saying, when even when you start with from the moment where you decide that you want to pivot to the moment where you get additional help or resources such as career coaching or a resume revamp or rebrand, to the moment where you start, reaching out, it's all you. You got to do the work. You no, I mean, yes, you can pay for some help, but you've got to do the work and you've got to embrace this change because it's your life. It's not just your career, it's your life.
It is your life, and that's special, and that deserves to be taken into consideration. And it always, step number one when you're ready to make any type of pivot is always clarity, and that takes deep self work. What works for one person doesn't work for the next. And so somebody in our early career, somebody saying, yeah, I really like this company, you should check it out. Now it's, what do you like about that company? What does culture mean to you? What does being a thought partner mean at this organization? What type of resources are being invested to mitigate this or that, or whatever it may be. And so instead of just taking people for their word, you have a deeper sense of what words mean to you, and then can use that information not as right or wrong, as is this in line with what my goals are and what my values are. And if it is, great, go at it in full force. And if it's not, that's just information that you have to make the best decision for you and yours.
And sometimes people have never even had their dream job, but they've had jobs where there's something that they like about it. Like I know for me, my what I loved about working at Marriott. So I worked at Marriott International, and I was VP of legal compliance for the region. So that means that I travel. And I never knew that I liked, it sounds funny as an expat, but I never knew I liked traveling that much until I took that role where I was able to go to different Marriott properties and have, trainings. And of course, I was there for work, but just the vibe and the feel of being treated nice when you show up at the hotel. Oh, hi, I mean, obviously they treat you nice because you're legal and you're there to do an audit, but but for sure, that was something that I didn't get in manufacturing. And that's something that I certainly didn't
Yeah.
get when working in financial services and banking. But that told, and I now realize that today, that I don't want to be grounded in one place. I've got to travel. I've got to have some sort of travel. And so maybe it's an exercise where people are comparing and contrasting their different roles. Well, you've never had your dream role, but what did you like when you worked at, a pharmaceutical company? What did you not like when you worked at the insurance company? And compare and contrast those.
This is the process I have people go through. First, what are your values? Because your values inside and outside of work don't change. You are who you are deep down inside when nobody's looking. And so, one of the things that caught me off guard during COVID was how important community was to me. As an introvert, like, I did not know I needed to be around people, but I longed for it. And so when looking at your values, anytime you felt like something was off, that's typically an indicator that your values are out of alignment. So, like, what are your top five, maybe top three non negotiable values? Then, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I am really good at certain things that I don't like to do. So, once I go through my strengths and weaknesses, then I go through my likes and dislikes. So, I really like doing something that I'm not the best at, but I really want to take my career there. So then I put together a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So I can start forming a strategic plan on how to make my next move. So obviously strengths are key selling points. Weaknesses are things that we need to work on or be at least able to address in a conversation, because that might be the difference between getting an offer and not getting an offer. Opportunities, definitely want to lean into. So if a certain industry is going through a major transformation, that might be a great time to swoop in because they're going to be hiring. In a flat housing market, maybe getting into real estate law, maybe not the best time, but there might, so that might be a threat to getting into real estate. But the opportunity might be going into, you look at your SWOT analysis and basically you just start at a really micro level and work your way out to the macro level so you can see small picture and how that goes all the way out to big picture, so you can put the pieces together, because otherwise it's just too overwhelming. And then this is a way to like backdoor into your feelings when so often we take emotions out of it. And when we're thinking about what we want for our life, our emotions, our feelings, our passion, our heart, that's what really needs to be a driving force. I mean, obviously our brain has its place, but you eventually get into, the logical side of looking at things. And then after you've done all of that, you can evaluate what your perfect fit is. So looking at those internal and external motivators to figure out where is their synergy, where is their opportunity. And that way you can cut out all the noise. Just because somebody's hiring doesn't mean that's the job for you. So ignore it. It's just a mute point, and laser focus in on the opportunities that are what you're looking for. Because then when you are thinking about your brand, you want to be known as the whatever that you're an expert in, whatever fuels your passion or your hunger, or your, what is your purpose. And then you can align it. And some people are like, I go to work for a paycheck. I feel you. But some paychecks feel better than others.
True.
And so what is going to give you the least amount of a headache, or, that is going to bring you the most amount of satisfaction? I worked with a lawyer once, and she was just bored. She had worked at the same company for 20 years. She had rolled out all kinds of programs and things like that across different departments in the US and abroad. And she was like, I'm just reinventing the wheel. I want to do something new. And then she ended up landing a job at a zoo. And she was like, it's close to home. I never thought about working at a zoo before, but it's like I still get the global experience. There are so many different investors that you're working with. The like I would never think, oh yeah, I and then when the opportunity came up, she was like, this is it. Like, this is not manufacturing. This is something that feels completely different. And she really and she you know, she's really enjoying what she's doing, and that is a beautiful place to be, even if it's not what you originally started off thinking.
There, you gave like so many words of wisdom in there. I was trying to take notes, but I mean, I think the first thing or the most resonating thing for me is just because the job opportunity is there doesn't mean it's a job for you. And I have to say, I have fallen to that trap many, many times. Okay, not many, many, but a few times where I was like, "Oh yeah, offer, great, I'll take it." Just because you've got the offer doesn't mean that's for you. And then the second piece about her finding, what she liked in the zoo. Absolutely. You have no idea what is out there until you start looking. Until you decide
Yep.
that you're going to rebrand and you're going to go after something that feels good for you, you don't know what's out there.
Yes, and it's amazing the way people find jobs. I mean, there's fractional work. So JYC Recruiting exclusively works with startups, and every startup needs a powerhouse legal team behind them. And a lot of times, startups can't have a general like a chief legal officer, but they do need general counsel, and they do need a legal team to help with contracts and policies and things. Sometimes what might work for you is doing some type of fractional endeavor in an innovative industry where it pushes you past the boundaries of what you've ever experienced before, and it lights your fire in a new way. And so there is unlimited opportunities if you're willing to put yourself forward for them. And that's kind of an empowering stance versus we're in a flat market, nobody's hiring.
Teegan Bartos, you've given us so many bits of information and words of wisdom. And I think if I had to kind of condense it down, it's the first is that pivotal moment where you decide, I've got to make a change. Like there's no waiting. We got to do this now. We've got to make a change. And then next, there's that process of the SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What opportunities are out there in the market? And hey, are there some threats? Maybe there's some downsides to things. And then I guess the last piece is the action. You've got to rebrand. You can't you got to do it. Okay, it's great to think about it. It's great to have analysis, but don't have paralysis analysis. Go out there and do it.
And you're in a perfect position, having a program to help expose legal professionals to different layers of technology. Sometimes it does take that. So if you're thinking, hey, this might be the route that I want to take, sign up for a course, participate, and get exposure. Even if you decide, no, not right for me, that is just more information for you to have. And it certainly didn't hurt you getting that exposure. I can tell you that. And so it is okay to think about it and be in that space of getting clarity and taking small steps of action, like taking a course, going to a workshop, conducting informational interviews from industry peers on what the day in the life looks like on their side of the fence to decide what ultimately is best for you.
Teegan, thank you so much for your words of wisdom and the guidance that you've given people. And I'm sure there are many lawyers listening now who are probably at the tipping point where they know that they have to make a change, right? I mean, we all know that these days, particularly 2024, life is different than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And we can no longer really just sit by and stand by and wait for things to change. We have to change ourselves. And this was such an empowering conversation and so great to have you on the show and share all of this wisdom with us. So thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And Teegan, if people want to find you and learn more about what you do, where should they go?
I am on LinkedIn. That is my go-to source of access. If you want tips, scripts, white files, things like that, free resources, you can go to my website. But if you want access to me, it's on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.